My name is Emma Campbell. I'm an Associate Professor of French at the University of Warwick. When it comes to thinking about non-specialist audiences, obviously one of the main groups that one thinks of are students who are sort of entering the academic world but aren't already part of it. So I guess when it comes to thinking about that question of engagement, that would incorporate things like pedagogy as well as other things which we often talk about, like impact or public engagement. In my own field, digital humanities covers everything from repositories like digital manuscripts to more synthetic projects to sort of modelling projects. So in historical terms it can actually be used as a way of reconstructing things or making materials available, but it can also have a more major impact on the nature of the research that you're doing. So, for example, there was a project recently at King's, UCL and Cambridge which was looking at the ways in which different manuscript traditions operate within a kind of broader European context and looking at the dissemination of different textual traditions outside of France. So the digital aspects of that project were connected to a rethinking of methodology and editorial practice. So there can be really interesting ways in which it actually really profoundly affects the way in which academics think. One of the interesting things about teaching the Middle Ages to students is getting them involved in thinking about how the Middle Ages may be surprisingly similar in some ways to the sorts of issues that they're interested in, but then how it also challenges them in other ways and may be different from what they might expect. So examples of that in the teaching I do currently would be thinking about gender and sexuality in the Middle Ages and how the Middle Ages or medieval texts may be surprisingly frank when it comes to certain sexual proclivities or desires, but how that might not fit into the sorts of categories we use today to describe those things. So one recent example of the way in which my research has translated into teaching would be a module that I ran on medieval animals, which was based on a research project that I was writing on translation and translatability, where in one of the chapters I look at bestiary manuscripts, which are these really amazing illuminated manuscripts that depict animals visually and then describe them and then allegorize them. And I just thought this would be great material for students. So I put that together with other depictions of animals in medieval literature. And what was really great about that was not just that the students then had access to some of the thinking I was doing in the book, but also that I was rethinking that material actively through teaching it, because the chapter wasn't actually about the sorts of things that we were discussing in class. Well, working with schools is actually one of the really interesting aspects of my role, and it was really nerve-wracking actually the first time I did that, because I really wasn't sure if the students would be interested in the kind of thing that I teach. What I think I was slightly surprised by, but also pleasantly surprised by, was that there seems to be a lot of interest actually in the Middle Ages, certainly. One of the sessions I run and have run for different schools and for different age groups is on a text called Bisclaveret by Marie de France, which is all about a werewolf, and just the fact it's about a werewolf alone is kind of interesting, I think, for students. And he's not a very typical werewolf, so he's quite courtly, he doesn't necessarily devour people very much. And talking to them about manuscripts and making them think about French in a different way, and how French in the Middle Ages in particular is part of a British heritage is also a bit of an eye-opener for some students, because they don't necessarily think about what happens after the Norman conquest and what happens linguistically.